I was exactly 30 seconds away from locking the front door of my restaurant when I heard the sharp tap of acrylic nails on glass that made my entire body tense. Through the window, I could see her standing there with that expression I had come to dread over the past 6 months since moving to Pinewood Springs, Colorado. Brenda Patterson, the HOA president of Meadowbrook Estates, wore her trademark leopard print blazer and had her highlighted blonde hair teased into what could only be described as a helmet of entitlement. I unlocked the door and pulled it open. "Brenda, we closed 5 minutes ago." "Oh, Stephen, I know you are not actually closed. I saw movement in there." She pushed past me without waiting for an invitation, her perfume so strong it could probably violate some kind of environmental protection law. "Besides, this will only take a moment of your time." I sighed and followed her inside, leaving the door unlocked since I knew this would not be quick no matter what she claimed. My restaurant, the Mountain Table, was the only full-service dining establishment in Pinewood Springs. Sure, there was a diner that served breakfast and lunch and a pizza place that delivered, but if anyone in this town of 3,000 people wanted an actual dinner out or needed catering for any event, they came to me. It was why I had chosen this location when I decided to leave Denver and start my own place. Less competition, lower overhead, and a guaranteed customer base. What I had not counted on was Brenda Patterson and her iron grip on the Meadowbrook Estates HOA, the largest and most affluent neighborhood in town. Since I lived in that neighborhood, having bought a beautiful 4-bedroom house on Aspen Lane, I was technically under her jurisdiction. She had made the past 6 months absolutely miserable with her ridiculous complaints and demands. "So what can I help you with, Brenda?" I asked, crossing my arms and leaning against the hostess stand. She pulled out her phone and started scrolling through something, her long nails clicking against the screen. "As you know, I am hosting the annual Meadowbrook Summer Gala next month. It is the social event of the season, Stephen. Everyone who is anyone in Pinewood Springs will be there." I had heard about this party. It was legendary in town, mostly because Brenda used it as an excuse to show off and remind everyone that she was the queen bee of our little community. "Okay, and I need catering for 150 guests. I have looked over your menu, and I think we can make it work." She finally looked up from her phone, giving me what I assumed she thought was a charming smile. "I will need the filet mignon as the main course, the lobster bisque as an appetizer, those little crab cakes you do, a full salad bar, 3 different sides, and of course an elaborate dessert spread. Oh, and an open bar with top-shelf liquor." I did some quick mental math. What she was describing would cost at least $15,000, probably closer to 20 with the top-shelf bar. That is a pretty extensive menu. When were you thinking? July 15th. That gives you exactly 4 weeks to prepare. All right, I can probably make that work. Let me pull up my computer and I will draft a proposal for you. With what you are describing, you are looking at somewhere between $15,000 and $20,000 depending on final headcount and specific liquor choices. Brenda's perfectly drawn eyebrows shot up. "Excuse me." "For the catering, that is what it will cost." I moved toward the computer at the hostess stand, ready to start putting together a formal quote. "Stephen, I think there has been a misunderstanding." Her voice had taken on that sickly sweet tone that I knew meant trouble. "I am not paying for this catering. You will be providing it as a community service." I stopped moving and turned to look at her. "I am sorry, what?" "The HOA has a clause in our bylaws that states all residents must contribute to community events. I am invoking that clause." "You will cater my gala free of charge. Consider it your community contribution for the year." I felt heat rising in my chest. Brenda, I have already paid my HOA dues. I contribute to the community by providing the only quality restaurant in town. What you are describing is not a community contribution. It is demanding free labor and products worth $20,000. Our bylaws are very clear, Stephen. As HOA president, I have the authority to request reasonable contributions from residents for community betterment. This gala brings the community together and raises our property values by maintaining Meadowbrook's prestigious reputation. No, the word came out flat and firm. I am not doing that. If you want me to cater your party, you will pay me like any other customer. Brenda's face transformed from fake sweetness to genuine anger in about half a second. Excuse me, did you just refuse a direct request from your HOA president? I refused an unreasonable demand for free services that would cost me thousands of dollars in food, labor, and lost business. There is a difference. She stepped closer to me, her expression turning nasty. You need to be very careful here, Stephen. I have the power to make your life in Meadowbrook Estates extremely difficult. I can fine you for any violation I find, and believe me, I will find violations. That fence you put up around your garden, I will measure it, and if it is even 1 inch too tall, that is a $500 fine. Your trash cans visible from the street, another fine. I can make every single day you live in my neighborhood a living hell. So you are threatening me because I will not give you free catering. I am reminding you of your obligations as an HOA member. Now, are you going to do the right thing and contribute to your community, or are we going to have problems? I looked at her for a long moment. Part of me wanted to just give in to avoid the headache. But a larger part of me, the part that had worked my ass off for 15 years in professional kitchens before opening my own place, the part that had invested my entire savings into this restaurant, refused to be bullied. We are going to have problems then, because I am not catering your party for free, Brenda. Not now, not ever. Her eyes narrowed to slits. You are making a huge mistake. I will see you at the next HOA meeting. Wear something nice because you are going to be the main topic of discussion. She spun on her heel and marched out, slamming the door hard enough that the bell above it fell off its hook and clattered to the floor. I stood there for a moment, my heart pounding. My head chef, Marcus, emerged from the kitchen where he had apparently been listening to the entire exchange. Boss, did that crazy lady just try to shake you down for free catering? Yeah, she did. And you told her no? I did. Marcus let out a low whistle. Man, you got some balls. Everyone in town knows you do not mess with Brenda Patterson. She is like the mob boss of the HOA world. Then it is about time someone stood up to her. I picked up the bell from the floor and set it on the hostess stand. Come on, let us finish closing up. I need a drink. The next morning, I woke up to find a certified letter in my mailbox. It was from the Meadowbrook Estates, HOA, signed by Brenda Patterson in her capacity as president. The letter informed me that I was being fined $500 for having my trash cans visible from the street on the morning of June 18th. It included a timestamp of 6:15 a.m. and a photo of my trash cans sitting at the curb, waiting for pickup, which did not happen until 7:30. I called my neighbor, Tom Henderson, who had become a good friend since I moved in. Tom was retired from a career as a lawyer, which made him my go-to person for legal questions. Tom, can the HOA fine me for having my trash cans out on trash day? Tom sighed on the other end of the line. What did you do to piss off Brenda? How do you know I did anything? Because she only goes after people with the trash can violation when she has a personal vendetta. Let me guess, you would not do something she wanted. I explained the situation with the catering demand. Tom listened quietly, and when I finished, he was silent for a moment. Stephen, I am going to be straight with you. Brenda has been running this HOA like her personal fiefdom for 8 years. She has chased off 3 families with her harassment when they did not fall in line. The problem is, most of what she does is technically within her authority as HOA president, even if it is morally bankrupt. So I am just supposed to let her fine me into submission. No, I am saying you need to be smart about this. Document everything. Every fine, every interaction, every time she shows up at your house or restaurant. Build a case. And start coming to the HOA meetings. Most people do not bother, which is why Brenda has so much power. If you can get other residents on your side, you might be able to vote her out. The next meeting is not for 3 weeks. Then you have 3 weeks to talk to your neighbors and survive whatever Brenda throws at you. What Brenda threw at me over the next week was a masterclass in petty tyranny. On Tuesday, I received a fine for my lawn being a 1/4 inch too long. On Thursday, another fine because my house number was not clearly visible from the street, even though it absolutely was. On Saturday, she claimed my car was parked too far from the curb and issued another fine. Each fine was $500. By the end of the first week, I was looking at $2,500 in bogus violations. I did what Tom suggested and documented everything. I took photos, saved all the letters, and started keeping a journal of every interaction. But I also started doing something else. I started talking to my neighbors. The first person I approached was Linda Morris, who lived 2 houses down from me. She was a middle-aged woman who ran a bookkeeping business from her home. I knocked on her door on Sunday afternoon with a plate of cookies from the restaurant. "Stephen, what a nice surprise." Linda took the cookies with a smile. "These look amazing. Thought you might enjoy them. Listen, do you have a few minutes to chat?" We sat on her porch and I explained what was happening. Linda's expression grew darker as I talked. "That woman is a menace," Linda said when I finished. "She did something similar to me last year when I would not volunteer to run her charity auction. I ended up with $3,000 in fines before I just paid her to make it stop." "You paid her," "Not officially. But she made it clear that if I made a substantial donation to her chosen charity, the fines would disappear. They did." That sounds an awful lot like extortion. It probably is, but what are we supposed to do? She is the HOA president. She has the board in her pocket. Most people just pay up or move away. What if we voted her out? Linda looked at me like I had suggested we fly to the moon. No one runs against Brenda. The last person who tried, she dug up some old DUI from 20 years ago and plastered it all over the neighborhood newsletter. He withdrew from the race and moved 3 months later. So everyone is just afraid of her, honestly. Yes. I had similar conversations with a dozen other neighbors over the next 2 weeks. The pattern was the same. Everyone hated Brenda. Everyone had a story about her abuse of power. But everyone was too afraid or too apathetic to do anything about it. The fines kept coming. By the time the HOA meeting rolled around, I was up to $7,000 in violations. I had not paid a single one, which meant that, according to HOA rules, I was at risk of having a lien placed on my property. The meeting was held in the community center on a Thursday evening. I arrived 15 minutes early and was surprised to see the parking lot already filling up. Apparently word had gotten around that there was going to be drama, and people loved drama. Inside, the community center's main room was set up with rows of folding chairs facing a long table at the front. Brenda sat in the center of the table with her board members flanking her on either side. I recognized 2 of them, Patricia Green, who ran the garden club, and Robert Walsh, who owned the local insurance agency. They both looked uncomfortable. I took a seat in the 3rd row. Tom Henderson slid into the seat next to me. Looks like a good turnout, he murmured. People love a show. Just stay calm. Do not let her bait you into losing your temper. That is what she wants. Brenda called the meeting to order at exactly 7 p.m. She went through the standard agenda items, approving the minutes from the last meeting, discussing the neighborhood landscaping contract, and reviewing the budget. It was all painfully boring, which I assumed was intentional. She was trying to make everyone impatient before she got to me. Finally, 45 minutes in, she cleared her throat. Now we come to a more serious matter. As many of you know, we have a resident who has been flagrantly violating our community standards and refusing to pay his legally issued fines. All eyes turned to me. I kept my expression neutral. Stephen Lawson has accumulated $7,000 in unpaid fines over the past 3 weeks. This is unacceptable behavior from a member of our community. Mr. Lawson, would you like to explain yourself? I stood up slowly. Sure, Brenda, I would love to explain. These fines are bogus and everyone here knows it. You issued them because I refused to cater your party for free. A murmur went through the crowd. Brenda's face flushed. That is a serious accusation and completely untrue. These fines were issued for legitimate violations of our community standards. Really? You fine me for having my trash cans out on trash day before pickup. You fine me for parking my car on a public street. You fine me for my lawn being a 1/4 inch too long, measured at 6 a.m. before I had a chance to mow. These are not legitimate violations. This is harassment. Our standards are clearly laid out in the bylaws that you agreed to when you purchased your home. If you cannot maintain those standards, perhaps Meadowbrook Estates is not the right community for you. I pulled out a folder from my bag. I have documented every fine you have issued me. I have also compiled a list of identical violations by other residents that you have ignored. Want to know how many people on this street have their trash cans out on trash day? All of them. Want to know how many got fined? Just me. Want to know how many people have cars parked on the street? At least 30. Fined? Just me. Brenda's jaw tightened. I do not have time to monitor every single violation. I address issues as they are brought to my attention. By yourself. Because you are the only one bringing these issues to your attention. Mr. Lawson, this is not productive. The fines stand. You have 2 weeks to pay them, or we will place a lien on your property. Tom stood up next to me. I would like to make a motion to review all fines issued over the past month to ensure they are being applied fairly and consistently across the community. Seconded, called out Linda Morris from the back of the room. Brenda looked flustered. That is not necessary. The board has full confidence in my judgment. Actually, Patricia Green said quietly from her spot at the table, I think that is a reasonable request. I have been hearing some concerns from other residents as well. Brenda's head snapped toward Patricia so fast I thought she might get whiplash. Patricia, we discussed this. We discussed a lot of things, Brenda, but I am uncomfortable with how this situation has been handled. Patricia looked at me, then back at Brenda. I vote in favor of the review. Robert Walsh shifted in his seat. I also vote in favor. Brenda's face had gone from flushed to bright red. Fine. The motion passes. We will review the fines at next month's meeting. But in the meantime, Mr. Lawson, the fines remain in effect. That is fine, I said calmly. I look forward to the review. The meeting wrapped up shortly after that. As people filed out, several neighbors came up to me to quietly express their support. Linda gave me a thumbs up. Tom clapped me on the shoulder. That went better than expected, he said. You got 2 board members to break ranks. That is huge. Yeah, but the fines still stand, and I am betting Brenda is not going to take this lying down. I was right. The next morning, I arrived at the mountain table to find Brenda's car already parked outside. She was not alone. Next to her stood a man in a suit carrying a clipboard. As I approached, Brenda gave me a triumphant smile. "Good morning, Stephen. This is Dale Cooper from the County Health Department. I called in a concern about potential health code violations at your establishment." My stomach dropped. A surprise health inspection could shut me down if they found anything wrong. And while I ran a clean kitchen, every restaurant has something that could potentially be cited if an inspector wanted to be difficult. "Good morning, Mr. Lawson," Dale said, extending his hand. He seemed professional and polite, which I hoped was a good sign. "I will need to conduct a full inspection of your facility. This should not take more than an hour or two." "Of course. Come on in." I unlocked the door and let them both inside. Brenda tried to follow Dale into the kitchen, but he stopped her. "Madam, I will need you to wait out here. Only authorized personnel in the kitchen during an inspection." "But I am the one who filed the complaint." "I understand, but that does not give you access to the kitchen. You can wait in the dining area." Brenda looked like she wanted to argue, but something about Dale's no-nonsense demeanor made her back down. She took a seat at one of the tables while Dale and I went into the kitchen. Marcus was already there, prepping for lunch service. His eyes widened when he saw the health inspector. "We have got an inspection," I told him quietly. "Keep working, stay calm, everything is fine." For the next 90 minutes, Dale went through every inch of my kitchen. He checked temperatures, examined storage procedures, inspected the walk-in cooler and freezer, reviewed our cleaning logs, and tested our sanitizer solutions. I followed him around, answering questions and providing documentation when asked. Finally, he finished his checklist and turned to me. "Mr. Lawson, I have to say, this is one of the cleanest kitchens I have inspected in quite some time. You are clearly running a tight ship here." Relief flooded through me. "Thank you. We take food safety very seriously. It shows I am not finding any violations. You will receive your report in the mail within a week, but I can tell you now that you passed with flying colors." We walked back out to the dining area where Brenda was still sitting, scrolling through her phone. She looked up expectantly when she saw us. "Well, what did you find?" Dale's expression remained neutral and professional. "I am not at liberty to discuss the specifics with you, madam. The report will be sent to Mr. Lawson as the owner, but I can tell you that your concerns did not result in any citations." Brenda's mouth fell open. "What? That is impossible." "I have heard multiple complaints about this place." "From whom?" I asked. "Name one person who has complained about the food or cleanliness of my restaurant." She sputtered but could not come up with an answer. Dale packed up his clipboard and headed for the door. "Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Lawson. Have a good day." He left, leaving me alone with Brenda. "You need to stop this," I said. "This has gone way beyond a disagreement about catering. You are trying to destroy my business because I would not give you free services. Do you realize how insane that is? You have embarrassed me in front of the entire community," Brenda hissed. "You made me look bad at that meeting. No one challenges me like that." "Maybe they should. You have been running this HOA like your personal kingdom for years. You bully people into doing what you want, and when they do not comply, you punish them. That is not leadership, Brenda. That is abuse of power. You think you are so smart. You think you are better than everyone else because you own a restaurant. But you are just a resident like everyone else, and that means you follow my rules. The HOA's rules, not your rules. There is a difference." She stood up, grabbing her purse. "We will see how smart you feel when you are dealing with a lien on your house. 2 weeks, Stephen. Pay the fines or lose your property." She stormed out for the second time in 3 weeks. Marcus came out from the kitchen. "Boss, that lady is crazy, like actually crazy." "Yeah, I am starting to agree with you." "So what are you going to do?" That was the question. I had 2 weeks before Brenda could legally place a lien on my house for the unpaid fines. Tom had told me I could fight it in court, but that would be expensive and time-consuming. The easier option would be to just pay the fines and move on with my life. But every time I considered that option, I felt sick. It was not about the money, although $7,000 was not nothing. It was about the principle. If I caved now, Brenda would know she could push me around whenever she wanted. And more importantly, every other resident in Meadowbrook Estates would learn the same lesson. Stand up to Brenda and she will destroy you. Better to just comply. I could not let that stand. So instead of paying the fines, I spent the next week doing something else. I started investigating Brenda. It turned out that when you own the only nice restaurant in a small town, people talk to you. They tell you things, share gossip, complain about their problems. I had been listening to these conversations for 6 months, and I realized I had accumulated quite a bit of information about Brenda Patterson and her activities as HOA president. I started making phone calls. I reached out to people who had moved away from Meadowbrook Estates, tracked down through social media and mutual acquaintances. I spoke with former board members. I reviewed every HOA newsletter and financial statement I could get my hands on. What I found was disturbing. Over the past 8 years, the HOA's operating expenses had increased by 40% while membership had remained flat. Large sums of money were being paid to various vendors for services like landscaping, pool maintenance, and community events. When I cross-referenced those vendors, I discovered that several of them had interesting connections to Brenda or her family members. The landscaping company was owned by her brother-in-law. The pool maintenance company listed Brenda's husband as a part owner on the business registration. The vendor who provided supplies for community events had the same business address as Brenda's home. It looked an awful lot like Brenda had been funneling HOA funds to her family and friends for years. And since most residents did not bother attending meetings or reviewing financial statements, no one had noticed. I compiled everything I found into a detailed report. Then I called Tom. "I need your legal opinion on something." When I showed him what I had found, Tom let out a long, low whistle. "Stephen, if this is accurate, Brenda has been embezzling from the HOA. This is not just unethical, it is criminal." That is what I thought. What should I do with this information? First, we need to verify it. I can help with that. I still have connections in the legal community, and I know a good forensic accountant. If we can confirm these financial irregularities, we need to present it to the full HOA board and potentially the police. The board is in her pocket, though. Patricia and Robert voted against her at the last meeting. That is 2 out of 5 board members. We might be able to get them on board if we present solid evidence. We spent the next few days verifying the information. Tom's forensic accountant friend, a woman named Jessica Chen, reviewed all the financial documents I had gathered. Her conclusion was damning. "This is absolutely embezzlement," Jessica told us over coffee at the mountain table. "She has been systematically diverting HOA funds to companies owned by her family members, and those companies are charging above market rates for their services. I estimate she has stolen at least $150,000 over the past 5 years. Can you testify to that if needed?" "Absolutely. I can provide a full report with documentation. This is pretty clear-cut fraud." Armed with this information, Tom and I reached out to Patricia Green and Robert Walsh. We met at Patricia's house, away from prying eyes and ears. When we laid out the evidence, both of them looked horrified. I knew something was not right, Patricia said, flipping through the financial documents. But I never imagined it was this bad. She always had explanations for everything, and she made you feel stupid if you questioned her. That is how people like Brenda operate, Tom said. They use intimidation and manipulation to keep people from looking too closely at what they are doing. Robert rubbed his face with both hands. We need to call the police. This is theft, serious theft. I agree, I said. But I wanted to bring it to you first as board members. You have the authority to remove her as president and report this to the authorities. We need a full board vote to remove her, Patricia said. That is 5 members total. Me, Robert, Brenda, and then there is Jennifer Holt and Michael Chang. Jennifer usually votes however Brenda tells her to, but Michael might be reasonable. We decided to approach Michael together. He was a software engineer who worked from home and generally kept to himself. When we showed him the evidence, his reaction was similar to Patricia and Robert's. I only joined the board because my wife thought it would be good to be involved in the community, Michael said. I had no idea any of this was happening. Yes, I will vote to remove her. This is insane. That gave us 4 votes out of 5, which was enough. We called an emergency board meeting for the following evening, citing serious financial concerns that needed immediate attention. According to HOA bylaws, Brenda as president could not refuse to hold a meeting if 4 board members requested it. The next evening, all 5 board members gathered in the community center. Brenda arrived last, looking annoyed. What is this about? I have plans this evening. Patricia, as vice president, took charge of the meeting. We have some serious concerns about HOA finances that need to be addressed immediately. Our finances are fine. I just reviewed everything last month. That is not what our independent audit shows. Tom stepped forward with Jessica Chen beside him. We have conducted a forensic analysis of HOA expenditures over the past 5 years, and we have found significant irregularities. Brenda's face went pale. You had no authority to conduct an audit. I am the president. Any board member can request an independent audit, Robert said. We looked it up in the bylaws. You are not required to approve it. Jessica began presenting her findings. As she went through the evidence, connecting the various vendor payments to Brenda's family members and showing the pattern of overcharging, Brenda's expression shifted from anger to fear. This is ridiculous. These are legitimate business expenses. Then, why did you not disclose that these vendors were connected to your family? Patricia asked. That is a clear conflict of interest that should have been reported to the board. I did not think it mattered. They provide good services. At 30% above market rates. Jessica countered. I have compared your landscaping costs to similar HOAs in the area. You are paying significantly more than you should be. This is a witch hunt. Stephen put you up to this because he is mad about his fines. Actually, Stephen brought the initial concerns to us, Tom said. But the evidence speaks for itself. This has nothing to do with personal disputes and everything to do with financial fraud. I move that we remove Brenda Patterson as HOA president effective immediately, Michael said, based on the evidence of financial impropriety and conflict of interest. Seconded, Patricia said. All in favor? Tom asked. 4 hands went up. Brenda sat frozen in her chair. The motion passes, Patricia said quietly. Brenda, you are no longer president of this HOA. We will be turning this evidence over to the police and to our insurance company to determine what criminal and civil actions need to be taken. Brenda stood up suddenly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. You are all going to regret this. I will sue every single one of you for defamation. I will destroy you. Actually, you will not, Tom said calmly. Because if you try to sue anyone here, we will countersue for the embezzled funds plus damages, and I guarantee you will lose. The evidence is overwhelming." Brenda looked around the room, seemingly waiting for someone to back her up or defend her. When no one did, the reality of her situation seemed to finally sink in. Her shoulders sagged and her aggressive posture crumbled. "I want a lawyer," she said finally. "That is your right," Tom replied. "But as of this moment, you have no authority over this HOA or its members. That includes Stephen Lawson. All fines you issued him are hereby declared null and void due to the clear abuse of authority for personal retaliation." We filed a police report that night. Detective Sarah Martinez from the Pinewood Springs Police Department took our statements and reviewed the financial evidence. She told us that cases like this could take months to investigate and prosecute, but that the evidence seemed strong enough to warrant criminal charges. "We will need to bring in the Colorado Attorney General's office since this involves fraud and embezzlement," Detective Martinez explained. "But I can tell you that this is not the first time we have seen HOA board members abusing their positions. It is more common than people think." Over the next few weeks, the story spread through Pinewood Springs like wildfire. Small towns love nothing more than a good scandal, and Brenda Patterson's fall from grace was the biggest news to hit our community in years. The local newspaper ran a front-page story about the investigation. People who had been fined or harassed by Brenda over the years came forward with their own complaints. The HOA board, now led by Patricia as interim president, hired a law firm to pursue civil action to recover the stolen funds. Through all of this, my restaurant became even busier than before. Apparently being the guy who took down the corrupt HOA president made me something of a local hero. People came in just to shake my hand and thank me for standing up to Brenda. One evening about a month after everything went down, Tom came into the mountain table for dinner. I sat down at his table with a beer. "Did you hear the news?" he asked. "What news?" "The district attorney filed formal charges against Brenda this afternoon. Wire fraud, embezzlement, theft. She is looking at serious prison time if convicted." I took a long drink of my beer. "How do you feel about that?" "Honestly, I feel like justice is being served. She hurt a lot of people over the years, not just financially but emotionally. She made people feel powerless and afraid in their own neighborhood. That kind of abuse does not just go away." "Yeah, I guess you are right." The HOA board also voted to reimburse everyone who was unfairly fined over the past 2 years. You should be getting a check for $7,000. I do not even care about the money anymore. I know, but take it anyway. You earned it. The following week, I was surprised to receive a visitor at the restaurant. It was Jennifer Holt, the board member who had always voted with Brenda. She looked embarrassed as she approached me. "Stephen, I owe you an apology." I knew something was not right with how Brenda operated, but I was too afraid to speak up. When you stood up to her, it made me realize how much of a coward I had been. "You were not a coward, Jennifer. She was good at making people afraid. Still, I should have been braver." "We all should have been. Thank you for doing what the rest of us could not." After she left, Marcus came out from the kitchen with a grin. "Man, you are like a celebrity now. Maybe we should rename the place Stephen's HOA Takedown Grill." "Please do not." "I am just saying, you could probably run for mayor at this point and win." "I am a chef, not a politician." Could have fooled me. 3 months later, I attended Brenda Patterson's trial. The prosecution had a mountain of evidence, and Brenda's defense attorney seemed to know it. They tried to argue that she had made mistakes, but had not intentionally committed fraud. But the jury did not buy it. She was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 4 years in prison plus restitution of $175,000 to the HOA. Her husband, who had been listed as an owner of the pool maintenance company, received 2 years probation for his involvement. The day after the sentencing, Patricia called me. "The board would like to officially thank you for everything you did. We are planning a community barbecue next month to celebrate the new direction of the HOA, and we would be honored if you would cater it." "Will I be paid this time?" I asked with a laugh. "Absolutely. Full market rate plus a generous tip. No more free labor demands, I promise." The community barbecue was actually a lot of fun. Nearly the entire neighborhood showed up, and for the first time since moving to Pinewood Springs, I felt like I was actually part of a community rather than just a resident being harassed by a petty tyrant. Tom gave a speech thanking everyone who had helped expose Brenda's corruption. He specifically called me out, which was embarrassing but also kind of nice. "Stephen could have just paid the fines and moved on," Tom said. "It would have been easier." But he chose to stand up for what was right, even when it was difficult and risky. That is the kind of neighbor and community member we should all strive to be. People applauded, and I felt my face flush, but I also felt proud. I had come to Pinewood Springs to start a new chapter in my life, to build something of my own. I had not expected to become some kind of small-town hero in the process, but I was not complaining. The mountain table continued to thrive. With Brenda gone and the HOA under new management, I could focus entirely on running my restaurant instead of fighting bogus fines and harassment. Marcus and I expanded the menu, added a weekend brunch service, and started hosting special events like wine tastings and cooking classes. About 6 months after Brenda's conviction, I was working in the kitchen when Marcus told me I had a visitor. I wiped my hands and went out front, surprised to see Patricia standing there with a man I did not recognize. "Stephen, this is my cousin David. He lives over in Boulder and has been wanting to try your food ever since I told him about everything that happened." We shook hands, and I invited them both to sit down. As I was taking their order, David said something that caught me off guard. "Patricia told me you are the only full-service restaurant in town. Have you ever thought about expanding, opening a second location?" "I have been so focused on making this location work that I have not really thought beyond it." "You should. I work in restaurant development, and I think you have something special here. Small-town fine dining is actually a growing market. People do not want to drive an hour to Denver for a nice meal." We talked for a while about the business side of restaurants. David gave me his card and told me to call him if I ever wanted to seriously discuss expansion. It was flattering, but I was not sure I was ready for that yet. That evening, after we closed, I sat alone in the dining room with a glass of wine. I thought about the past year, about everything that had happened since I moved to Pinewood Springs. The conflict with Brenda had been stressful and exhausting, but it had also taught me something important. I had spent most of my career working in other people's kitchens, following other people's rules, building other people's dreams. When I finally opened my own place, I had been so afraid of failure that I was almost ready to compromise on my principles just to avoid conflict. But standing up to Brenda had reminded me why I went into this business in the first place. It was not just about cooking food or making money. It was about creating something meaningful, about being part of a community, about refusing to let bullies and tyrants win. My phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I answered anyway. "Is this Stephen Lawson?" "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Rachel Kim. I am a reporter with Colorado Public Radio. I am working on a story about HOA abuse in Colorado, and your case with Brenda Patterson keeps coming up. Would you be willing to talk to me about your experience?" I hesitated for a moment, then agreed. If my story could help other people who were being bullied by their HOAs, It was worth sharing. The interview aired 2 weeks later. Rachel did a great job presenting the facts of the case while also exploring the larger issue of HOA corruption and abuse of power. She interviewed several experts on HOA governance and talked to other people who had similar experiences with power-hungry board members. After the story aired, I received calls from people all over Colorado thanking me for speaking out. Some of them shared their own nightmare HOA stories. Others asked for advice on how to fight back against unfair treatment. I did my best to help where I could, mostly by connecting people with Tom, who had become something of an expert on HOA law through our experience. He ended up taking on several cases pro bono, helping other residents fight corrupt board members. The Meadowbrook Estates, HOA, underwent major reforms under Patricia's leadership. They implemented new financial oversight procedures, term limits for board members, and clearer processes for residents to appeal fines and decisions. It was not perfect, but it was a massive improvement over Brenda's reign. 1 year after the whole thing started, I was preparing for the lunch rush when I heard the familiar bell above the door. I looked up from the reservations book and saw a family walking in. They were clearly tourists, probably passing through on their way to one of the ski resorts. "Table for 4, I asked. "Yes, please. We heard this was the best restaurant in town." "The only restaurant in town," I corrected with a smile, "but I like to think we are pretty good anyway." As I seated them and handed out menus, I thought about that phrase. The only restaurant in town. When I had chosen Pinewood Springs for my restaurant, I had seen that as a competitive advantage. Less competition, guaranteed customers. What I had not realized was that it also came with responsibility. Being the only restaurant meant that when someone needed catering for a wedding, they came to me. When a family wanted to celebrate an anniversary, they came to me. When the high school needed somewhere to host senior dinners, they came to me. I was not just running a business. I was providing an essential service to my community. That was why Brenda's demand for free catering had been so insulting. She had tried to leverage my importance to the community as a weapon against me, to force me into compliance through the threat of lost business and social ostracism. But she had miscalculated badly. Being important to the community did not make me vulnerable. It made me powerful. When push came to shove, people chose the restaurant that fed them over the HOA president who harassed them. Marcus came out from the kitchen. "Boss, we need to talk about the menu for the summer season. I have got some ideas for new dishes using local produce. Let me hear them." We spent the next hour going through his proposals. He had really grown as a chef over the past year, taking more initiative and showing real creativity. I was proud of him and I told him so. "Thanks, boss. I learned from the best." "You are just saying that so I will approve your weird beetroot dessert idea." "Is it working? Maybe. Let me think about it." That evening was busy, as most Friday evenings were. Every table was full and we had a waiting list. I moved through the dining room, checking on customers, answering questions about the menu, and generally making sure everyone was happy. At one point, I stopped by a table where an elderly couple was finishing their meal. The woman smiled up at me. "Young man, that was absolutely delicious. We drove up from Denver specifically to try your restaurant after hearing about it from friends. I am so glad you enjoyed it. Please come back anytime." "We certainly will. And I have to say, we heard about what you did with that awful HOA woman. Good for you for standing up to her." More people should have that kind of courage. After they left, I found myself thinking about courage. I had never thought of myself as particularly brave. I was just a chef who did not want to be pushed around. But I guess sometimes courage is not about being fearless. It is about being afraid and standing up anyway. The truth was, I had been terrified during the whole conflict with Brenda. Terrified of losing my house, of losing my business, of failing in this new chapter I had worked so hard to create. But I had been more terrified of what would happen if I gave in, if I let someone like her dictate how I lived my life. 2 years after everything went down, the mountain table was more successful than I had ever imagined. We had been featured in several food magazines, won awards from regional dining organizations, and built a loyal customer base that extended well beyond Pinewood Springs. David, Patricia's cousin, convinced me to at least consider expansion. We started exploring potential locations in other small Colorado towns that lacked quality dining options. It was exciting and terrifying in equal measure. Tom retired from his informal legal practice, but remained active in HOA reform advocacy. He had helped pass new state legislation that provided better oversight of HOA boards and clearer processes for residents to challenge unfair decisions. Brenda's case had become a cautionary tale used in HOA governance training across Colorado. Patricia continued as HOA president and was genuinely good at the job. She focused on building community rather than enforcing petty rules. Under her leadership, Meadowbrook Estates became a neighborhood people actually wanted to live in rather than a place they felt trapped. As for Brenda, I heard through the grapevine that she had been released from prison after serving 3 years of her 4-year sentence. She and her husband had divorced, and she had moved out of state. I felt a strange mix of emotions when I heard that. Part of me was satisfied that justice had been served. But another part of me just felt sad that it had come to this. If Brenda had just been willing to pay me for catering her party like any normal person, none of this would have happened. She would still be HOA president. She would not have a criminal record. Her marriage might still be intact. But her ego and her sense of entitlement had led her to escalate a simple business transaction into a personal vendetta, and that choice had destroyed her life. There was a lesson in that, I thought. About the dangers of unchecked power, about the importance of treating people with basic respect, about how the choices we make when we think we are invulnerable can come back to haunt us. On a sunny afternoon in June, 3 years after I first opened the mountain table, I stood outside looking at the building that had become such a central part of my life. The sign above the door needed a fresh coat of paint. The flower boxes Marcus had insisted on installing were blooming with colorful petals. Through the window, I could see our servers setting up for dinner service. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom. HOA meeting tonight, pizza at my place after. You in? I smiled and typed back. Always. The HOA meetings were a lot more pleasant these days. No drama, no corruption, just neighbors working together to maintain a nice community. It was what HOA meetings were supposed to be all along. As I headed back inside to help with prep, I thought about that day when Brenda had showed up demanding free catering. At the time, it had felt like a crisis. Now it felt like the best thing that could have happened. Because that confrontation had forced me to decide what kind of person I wanted to be. Someone who gave in to bullies to avoid conflict, or someone who stood up for what was right even when it was difficult. I had chosen to stand up, and it had changed everything. Not just for me, but for an entire community that had been living under the thumb of a petty tyrant for too long. My restaurant was more than just a place that served food. It had become a symbol of resistance against abuse of power, a reminder that ordinary people could fight back against unfair treatment and win. And that was worth more than any amount of money Brenda could have paid me for catering her stupid party. Marcus called out from the kitchen. "Boss, Are you going to stand out there daydreaming all day, or are you going to help me with this risotto? Coming, I called back. I took one last look at the street, at the mountains rising in the distance, at the town I had come to think of as home. Then I went inside to do what I loved most: create delicious food for people who appreciated it. Life was good. The restaurant was thriving. The community was healthy. And I had learned that sometimes the most important ingredient in any recipe is not something you find in a kitchen. Sometimes it is simply the courage to say no.